Kia ora, hello, welcome to Alison Jones and to Kawehau Hoskins, who are our two public lecture speakers for this year's PESA 2023 conference. Their public lecture is titled, What is Indigenising the Academy and Why Attempt It? Thank you so much to both of you for joining me.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So the PESA conference theme this year is very much connected to thinking about the kinds of times we live in and thinking about what the big ideas are that are going on. And the main topic that you're speaking about in your lecture obviously is about indigenisation. And I wondered if you could speak to how that relates to philosophy of education today.
Go for it, TK.
Kia ora, Imogen. No, I thought I had, there were too many questions in that question. Part of what I recognised in your question was a kind of concern for the kind of world we're living in currently, you know, that seems to be increasingly polarised and unstable and frightening. And I think within any of the work we do, politically or theoretically, there's always that tension between, you know, rights and recognition, you know, identity politics, all of those things that stem from kind of, you know, the experiences of marginalised communities through colonisation and other, you know, forms of whatever, oppression. And the way that leads to a kind of proliferation of positions and rightly so, you know, because people are trying to say, here we are, and this is who we are, and these are what our needs are, and this is what our experiences have been. But as we are increasingly kind of, you know, frightened about climate change and worried and concerned, we start to make other positions, you know, our enemy. And we have less tolerance, it seems, for, you know, kind of the diversity of identities and positions in our worlds. That's how it feels to me. And so, you know, I think that philosophy of education and education more generally has a responsibility, you know, to be speaking into those spaces that feel like there's no way to have a conversation, you know, there's no way to bridge a relationship or bring a relationship into any form of engagement. I mean, that's obviously would be uncomfortable engagement, but, you know, without engagement, there's no possibility of kind of trying to, you know, get positions to connect a little bit and care about those, you know, the realities for those sides. And I think probably indigenisation, this is my feeling, is that indigeneity, I mean, you can say that's just another position that people are now forced to respond to. But I think what I would say is that indigeneity offers something quite important to conversations that philosophy of education will be having, because there is that always focus on the relationship. So there's all of these positions and all of this disastrous stuff going on, and all we really have is our ability, our capacity, our capability to come into engagement and to come into relationship. And I mean, that sounds like a really sort of, in a way, dumb and simple idea. But on the other hand, what else have we got? And so all of the kind of thinking and the practices and the ways of being that I think Indigenous peoples, in my view, still continue to privilege and practice are what I see, generally speaking, missing in, you know, in the big kind of debates and the big conflicts that our worlds are experiencing. So I just think indigeneity has something to offer there. Absolutely. Philosophy of education, I don't know, could be giving attention to those sorts of ideas to make a kind of contribution into the crises that you've raised in your question.
Yeah. Tēnā koe, Imogen, and I agree with everything Te Kawehau says about relationality being at the heart of it. One of the things I think in terms of philosophy of education, when I think about some slightly different aspect of it, is the significance in the philosophy of education of shifting language, shifting meanings, providing theoretical framing for new ideas and leading thinking, leading thought. And that is what we all desperately need, really. I feel, you know, in the larger sense, if I can talk politically, I think that the left has kind of lost its way in terms of effective languaging of the problems that confront us. And the right has been very successful in colonizing that language, if you like, that we all developed in the 1980s, 1990s, and we haven't really been able to respond in any hugely effective way. And so I think that the role that we have is to think about the language we use, think about terms that reshape our world, reshape possibilities. And I suppose in terms of the Indigenising project, as a Pākehā, I'm fascinated by the interest in that project, by the fact that many non-Māori, as well as Māori obviously, are really interested in what the idea of indigenisation means, both personally and politically. And I think for us in New Zealand, we're in quite a unique position in having this relationship between Crown and Māori to be able to think through how we might hold different ontologies, different epistemologies, different ideas together in relationship, rather than just saying, well, if we're all going to support indigenisation and mātauranga and co-governance or whatever you want to, you know, however you want to bunch those ideas, then science goes out the window or science is threatened, or Pākehā power is threatened or whatever. You know, there's sort of this kind of zero-sum game, this dualism that immediately arises, and you have one or the other. And one of the things I think the conversations about indigenisation help us do is to hold multiple ideas together without one feeling that the other, without one being destroyed, if you like. I mean, one of the things that concerns me, for example, is the way that the anti-science rhetoric has really rucked up over the last 2 or 3 years post-COVID, post-Trump, well, you know, articulated by Trump, this anti-science approach. And it seems to me that we need to learn to admire, critique, and understand and uphold science at the same time as we can engage with other ideas, critical ideas, different knowledge systems, different knowledges. And it seems that the significance of science has maybe we've without really meaning to undermined the foundational nature of science in our modern society by critiquing it without actually being able to find the language which allows science to stand alongside critique, if that makes sense. But it really does concern me significantly that we've got this massive anti-science turn, which is twinned with conspiracy theories and ideas that are deeply problematic for us, I think. Bit of a long-winded answer.
Well, I suppose it speaks to what you're saying about the way of having multiple things. And I suppose what Te Kawehau you were talking about identity politics and how we relate and communicate with one another, and those missed connections perhaps that are going on. that's what I hear from both of your answers, and I wonder if you could speak to how those issues you see manifesting in education, or how those issues or those ideas about communication and holding multiple things and an Indigenous approach in that way, how that could respond to issues in education.
Well, I think, we know that in the New Zealand context that, mātauranga is finding its place in the curriculum, and alongside science. We've got a New Zealand histories curriculum that I imagine is trying to bring Māori knowledge into as well, or Māori sort of stress Māori locations within that, not just understand Māori as victims of something, but as active in processes of engagement in our history. So those sort of things are holding space in education and schooling, and I guess they are under attack currently, and as Alison's saying, those sorts of attacks will continue for the very reasons I guess we've just outlined, is that there's this idea that it's either this or that, or if it's this and that, your this has to be judged by our knowledge systems and our value systems to be okay, to be present, to have space, and if it doesn't, then it's false, it is untrue, it is wrong, and it needs to be removed. And I think in places like the States, where that argument turns on, but it works between sort of science and religion, and so there's those sort of things are pitted against each other, and that binary kind of set of critiques comes into the New Zealand context. Mātauranga ends up standing in for religion, and that that debate is kind of overlaid onto our context. So I think we're in for a rough time, and I think with the change of government and so on, that is going to ramp up probably. So I think it's difficult, because I think it's really hard for Māori to say, or Indigenous knowledge or Indigenous thinking to say, that we have something to offer, when often we're also understood as a liability. Or I find in my work, one day I'm an asset and the next day I'm a liability. And so, it's kind of, it's frustrating to think that the promise of indigeneity, the promise of Indigenous thinking, struggles to, present itself as offering something that is not just, one side of that binary. It's actually offering something to the conversation, to ways of being together, to ways of speaking and relating across, significant differences. And it's difficult to try and talk about the ground of engagement, the importance of the ground of engagement, the promise of it, what it might, offer us. It's not like it's going to solve everything, but it is that kind of foundation. So I can see the promise, I can see what indigenisation offers. I think it is offering already so much to education, but it is constantly comes up against this idea that it is a problem, and that it is a series of, I suppose, identity positions that need to be kind of put in their place, if you like.
Yeah, again, I 100% agree with that analysis. I suppose from where I'm standing, I do quite a lot of work in the university education scene, if you like, related to education of colleagues, related to te tiriti o Waitangi. And I guess, as I said before, I'm very interested in the massive openness that I have found amongst colleagues, the colleagues that I've been teaching, and they're probably not the ones who are opposed to it all, because they wouldn't be coming to these classes, but massive interest in thinking not about Māori, but about themselves, ourselves, in relation to being of this place, from this place, whether we're new immigrants or whether we're born here, whether we have generations of ancestors here. And that openness to thinking about a whole range of different ideas, different ontologies, different ways of even thinking about, well, I suppose this is ontological, of thinking about the nature of nature, the nature of the world, the relationship between the social and the natural, or culture and nature, all those kind of quite deeply philosophical positions, which we don't teach in those courses as such, but which are constantly bubbling to the surface, which have a massively positive effect on the people that I teach, who come away really philosophically expanded, if you like, even though they didn't come thinking that they were going to get any philosophy. They thought, oh, we'll learn about the te tiriti or the treaty, we'll learn about New Zealand history, we'll learn a bit about tikanga, etc. And yet what they are encountering there are some of these quite wonderfully fundamental and profound ideas about the nature of life, you know, and human life and non-human life as well. So I think that, you know, where educational philosophy and indigenisation, if you like, kind of coalesce in those teaching moments, or those interactive moments, can be really quite exciting and important for people in a way that is more profound than just sort of doing book learning, if you like, or discussing something in a fairly dried way, but in an environment where people feel that they can really explore difference that is not out there, but actually right here amongst us and within ourselves. I think we're in New Zealand in a really, as I said before, a very privileged and exciting position to be able to do this kind of work, simply because of the relationships, the generous relationships, particularly from Māori towards non-Māori, about tikanga, about mātauranga, and about a Māori view of the world. Yeah, I think we're very rich. We're very rich from that point of view. We're very lucky.
Amazing. Kia ora. Thank you so much for that, both of you. It's been amazing to speak with you today, and I'm so very looking forward to your public lecture at the end of this year and hearing you speak more about Indigenising the Academy and why we should attempt it. So thank you so much for speaking with me.